Good morning and welcome to the Como Vanguard podcast. I am Nick Knoth, your co-host. Joining me as always is David Lyle. David, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. It's been a while since we've had a city council meeting to talk about, so it's we'll have to get back into the swing of things here.
That's right. For listeners who are wondering, where were you guys? Where was council? Council took a little hiatus. One, because of July 4th holiday, they canceled the meeting around that, which is common. And then they had to cancel another meeting because the council chambers were having essentially their AV and IT technology renovated and doing some much needed upgrades. And I can say, as somebody who spends too much time watching the meetings, that there's a noticeable improvement in the quality of the stream and the audio, and even being in the chamber already, it's much better. So I'm glad to see that happen. I do, my one plug on that is I hope sooner than later the city chooses to start streaming their meetings on their YouTube account or Facebook. I don't care which one, although I prefer YouTube, just because the city's Granicus system, as it's called, is not the most user-friendly. But that being said, well, I digress. Joining us today as our guest is Ward 3 Councilwoman and Mayor Pro Tem, Dr. Jacque Sample. Jacque, how are you?
I'm doing pretty good. Glad to be here.
We are. Well, thank you for joining us. We're recording this a couple days later than usual just to accommodate schedules. So we appreciate you accommodating us and joining us today. So from this past Monday night's council meeting, this was a rather tame council meeting, not too many hot topics, or really any hot topic, I would say, compared to previous council meetings. And It was over before 10 o'clock.
Right.
And so those two things combined meant it was a dull affair.
Right. So just some foreshadowing, that will not be the case in August.
Oh, I know. Yes.
So our council meetings are starting at 6.
Yeah, I was going to say council's starting earlier in August to accommodate what I imagine will be some lengthy yes. meetings. So let's go ahead and dive into it. And I'm just going to go down our key takeaways from Monday night's council meeting, starting with, council unanimously greenlit the Water and Light 2026 Renewable Energy Plan. And for me, the key takeaway there, as we highlighted, was that plan, the goal remains 25% renewable energy, and the city is yet to hit that.
Yes.
It's at 23.5% for 2026. And if I remember correctly, staff are saying that the city would have hit the renewable energy goal by now if the Greenbelt Express had been on time in their construction.
There was another project that limited our ability to have renewables. Yes.
Right.
Yeah. In fact, I believe they said that had that been in place, we would have exceeded the 25% goal.
Yes. And I think they said that would happen last year, even if it had been on time. So hopefully 2027, if not sooner. Well, I guess that would be the soonest because we're rounding out 2026 right now. It's crazy to think we're already over halfway through the year. I feel like we just started. Well, any comments on the Renewable Energy Plan? I think that is a straightforward subject, one that the city is well used to by now, well established. It's making progress every year. This, 2026 is better than 2025. They're making their way towards the goal. I know there's always folks, especially from the Sierra Club and climate action groups, who know progress is enough progress on that subject. And I understand and respect that, but the city is making progress.
Right. We are. And patience has never been a virtue of mine. So I understand the impatience with meeting the goals. But in this case, it's out of our control. We didn't say, no, we're not going to do this. It was something else that was preventing us to meet the goal. But I do appreciate the Sierra Club and other groups coming in and pushing us, because it I don't want to say increases our attention because we're already paying attention, but it does increase the urgency so that we don't forget, when these discussions come up, that where we can do better, we should be doing better. So I do appreciate that message.
I've got a question for you. One of my frustrations as a local government person is something like this, and it's nothing to do with the city, is I feel for the climate activists and for the renewable energy folks, and I share their concerns and their hopes. But my frustrations are, man, the city can only do so much. It's a dot on the chart of climate change or whatever you want to call it, and it's not going to change things in the broader scope, right?
In the global, yeah.
In the global, even statewide,
yeah.
right? Even regionally. And that's frustrating. And I'm curious if you have any similar feelings in terms of, Columbia being able, let's say we knocked our goal out this year, hit 30%. Boone County is the same, right? Mid-Missouri is the same. Missouri hasn't changed. Missouri doesn't have renewable energy goals in the way Columbia does. And so I don't know, maybe that's less of a question and more of an expression of my own thoughts and feelings.
Well, I think that's fair. And I think, the frustration isn't just around energy. There's people who are very passionate about a lot of different things and don't necessarily realize the multiple layers and avenues you have to figure out to actually make something happen. That being said, specific to the climate activists, I tend to think of them as a group, again, as many groups are, as a steward. They feel like they're a steward of our world and they want to leave a safe place for their families and loved ones. And so, and I can identify with that passion and that center theory, if you will. I can identify with that. So I think that's what's driving them. I don't think that they're speaking up just to be ornery. I think that
absolutely.
yeah.
And it's not, don't confuse my comments for saying, oh, is it even worth it?
Right.
It's worth it. Right.
Yes.
It's more so of like, oh, you can sometimes feel like you're yelling into the wind and stuff like that. But I digress. We can move on.
Well, my question would be, do you recycle? I mean, because then if you're saying that the city is just a drop in a bucket, then I shouldn't have to worry about recycling or driving my hybrid or electric vehicle, or because it's not going to make much difference. But I mean, that's what we face every time. I mean, I think on all kinds of issues, we face what difference does one person make?
Right. It's that whole ripple effect, right? That it drop a pebble in the water and you have the little ripple, and then maybe you set an example for somebody else, or they say, hey, look, they actually made this happen. We can do it too. And that incremental change, because change is hard for people.
My question on this topic, and since Nick, you were a council person, and then Jackie Sample is a council person, my question is, how does the city go about? Are they like a shopper? They have staff member then who basically is looking at what is at the store of renewable energy and how do we go shopping for it? And how are we going to piece it together to produce the picture of powering Columbia?
Yes.
So, I mean, so they just sit there and basically they look and see what's available from Illinois or Kansas or further away and say, can we tap into that? And then they try to make deals with those companies,
yes.
Right?
So we're part of that MISO, which I can never remember what that acronym.
Mid-continent something.
And I can never remember what the acronym means, but it's kind of like a trading market, for a lack of the energy trading market. And they advise the city on when to turn things on, when to turn things off, when, all of that kind of thing. It's very much above my brain power to understand how all of it works, but it is essentially piecing to, using the utility brains to piece together what the city's consumption is, what we're going to need in the future, to make sure we have things in place to meet the needs of the future. So it's interesting.
I looked at the plan that was posted as part of the material and the prep material for the city council meeting on the agenda, and looking at what they break it down into very complicated, and I didn't read it word for word. I looked at it slide for slide, but again, I didn't understand a lot of it. But it gets back to what you're saying. I mean, and there are some very small percentages, but then you have to take into account, how are we putting this together? Where is it coming from? What are we being charged? Does it make sense? Are we being good stewards of the city's decision-making and money to make these choices? And I think that's a hard task.
Well, I know one of the things, and this is something that I know Jackie and the council discussed that night, that is discussed every year, is those power supply purchases. Because to Jackie's point, it really is kind of a speculative market, right?
Mm-hmm.
The city has to pre-order essentially power for the next year, and it may or may not use all the power it orders, but it still has to pay for it.
Yeah, and I think Aaron Keyes spoke to that on Monday about how we could lose money.
Yep.
Yeah.
And there's a chance, my understanding is if let's say we order more, the city orders more energy than it needs, or more power, it can sell the excess, but you don't know what it's going to be worth at that point, right? So that's where, as Jackie was saying with Aaron Keyes, the utilities director, saying that's the speculation.
Yeah.
So, it's the same, it's a similar concept to Public Works ordering salt. Like, you don't know how much salt you're going to need because you don't know how much snow and ice you're going to deal with.
But you don't want to run out.
But you have to order it in advance, and you rather have more than less.
Yes, absolutely.
It just kind of surprises me, because one chart that they do, which is the 2026 estimated renewable energy percentage, and it shows the location of where these energy providers are. Crystal Lake contract number 1, Crystal Lake contract number 2, both from Hancock County, Iowa, then the Jefferson City landfill gas, and then the Columbia landfill gas, then the non-metered customer production. That would be if I put in solar panels at my house and I was using that energy, but I had excess, I could sell it, or the city could take that. West Ash, Solar and Truman Solar. So 4 of these sources are from Columbia, 1 from Jeff City and 2 from Hancock County. I wonder if they're, in order to reach, that's 23.5%, which we talked about, and it also shows the cost. Some of those percent of system load is as little as 0.77 or 0.03% or 1.8%. The big one is the Crystal Lake contract number 2 from Hancock County, Iowa, 13.5%. So that's well past half of what we get. And I'm not questioning staff. I'm sure they're looking to diversify and add other sources there. But we're one, again, it's going to go back to what you said, Nick, in a different way. We're one of many who are looking to do this. So
absolutely. And another thing folks may not be aware of that I know council and staff are because they spend so much time talking about it is these projects, if and when the city chooses to try and go invest or purchase renewable energy from them, that is not something that it's like, hey, we want to do this. Can we get it tomorrow? It is those projects like this project is going to come online in 10 years. Would you like to be one of the folks receiving energy from that? Make that decision tomorrow.
Yes.
Right?
And hopefully we'll have our transmission line in place for that by then.
Well, and also if that project comes to completion, because
Right.
the city has before, and it's no fault of the cities, invested or gone in a direction of wanting to sign for power from a renewable energy source that ultimately didn't come to fruition. That's happened.
Mm-hmm.
And then they're burned on that and be like, okay, well, we waited 3 years or 5 years or however long and didn't happen. And it's not their fault. It's the project fell through or whatever. So that's a whole other dynamic. It's a complicated and fascinating subject.
I know we want to move on. Just one quick question. During the discussion Monday night, there was that talk about the 3% impact on rates. That means that the city is approved to spend up to 3% more. I don't know if I understand what the 3% impact is.
My understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, is that it was a 3% cap. Like rates could not be raised more than 3% for renewables.
It's basically saying the city has said, we want to use renewable energy, but we're not going to spend exorbitantly on it. We've got a 3%. If it's going to increase the rates more than 3%, then we're out.
Yes.
That's accurate.
Okay.
All right. Well, we can go on to the next subject, which was the FY27 Capital Improvement Project Plan. This is a multi-year plan that orchestrates the capital investments for the city's infrastructure, facilities, equipment purchases that is done every year and is reflective of really essentially a 10-year plan, but is handled one year at a time. This is something that, because it's annually, I've never seen it as a contentious subject. Certainly, it didn't seem so on Monday night's council meeting. It is, again, part of a 10-year plan, so none of it is really a surprise.
Correct.
But I liked looking through what these are. I mean, because if you ever have an idea of what might be coming up. So if it's every year, then, Nick, my question is that some of these projects aren't going to happen this coming year, but it will show up on this year and on next year and every year until it does happen?
It's really a running tab, almost.
How much is appropriated
Exactly.
each year.
It's just it's financial oversight of here's how much we've spent in this 10-year block, right? Because this is representative of every 10 years, the people of Columbia go and they vote to renew the capital improvement sales tax. And part of that tax is a plan that the city proposes to citizens saying, if you approve it for another 10 years, here's all the things we're going to do, and then breaking it down year by year in terms of the money being spent as it's taxed and those dollars are collected.
But each one of these projects still comes up in front of the council when it's time for them to be individually approved, right?
Absolutely.
Because I think people should look through this just because it gives you an idea of what is coming up. And if you're a golfer, you can see that. If you're a pickleball player, you can see what's planned for the pickleball courts out at Albert Oakland. And they're just finishing up the upper courts. And then the plan is to redo the lower courts. And then there was something else that catches my attention, which I like track and field, and I spent a lot of time at track and field meets, and they're talking about an 8-lane track out at what I would call the fairgrounds, the Northeast, whatever. And the discussion will have to come up once they get to the project, but I'm still trying to figure out what does the city need an 8-lane track for?
Well, you might have to have Gabe on sometime because he has this beautiful vision, maps, layouts, renderings of what this space will eventually be. And they're really wanting to build it up to be able to host like state meets and district competitions and things. Because it's not only going to be the track, it's going to be turf soccer fields, I think. And I think even a cricket field.
Yeah, a little bit of everything.
Yeah. The roller derby is going to be out there. So
I get some of that, but I'm thinking you've got 3 decent tracks, Hickman, Rockbridge, Battle. University of Missouri is putting in a new outdoor track.
Yeah.
You don't want to compete with your
Well, it's all
town.
because it's honestly, it really, when we say Gabe Huffington, who's the Parks and Rec director, it really is also Amy Schneider with CVB.
That's true.
Which is when they're going for something like that eight lane track or whatever it is with the goal of, as Jacque said, bringing and qualifying for a specific type of event. It is just doing the math backwards of saying, we want to be able to compete. We think we can win these contracts for whatever the competition is, but we have to have this specific type of track. And if it's not somewhere else in town, and the city now has taken over this, what has it been relabeled? Northeast
Park. Yeah.
Yeah, which I'm sure will change again. At
yeah,
some
I'm sure it will.
The former fairgrounds. That is the mindset and how it works is really CVB and Parks and Rec work together, say, what do we want to compete for so that we can bring those events here and bring those sales tax dollars and those tourism dollars to Columbia. Because Columbia is, as we've talked about in previous shows, very transient community. We host a ton of events, and somehow there's even more out there for us to host.
Right.
And this is representative of that.
Well, I'm not saying I'm not for it. I'm just curious about it. And that's the argument that they use for the cross-country course out of Gans Creek, and it's been a huge success. I love that. And I just would be curious to see how this will fit into the future plans, because to try to get a state meet or anything else is going to be
that's why I'm saying you need to talk with Gabe, because the final renderings are impressive. And he's even said, he goes, this isn't going to be done before I retire, because it's going to be a multi-year, multiple field, a huge thing while still maintaining space for the fair. So it'll be interesting.
Well, we'll find out, David, to your point. Trust me, we'll see if it works or not, right? Because it'll be the black and white of, is the city of Columbia awarded the contracts that host these events
that we're seeking. Yeah.
And if not, then it becomes a question of investment if it doesn't succeed.
Right.
Well, I could see partnership with Columbia College, because Columbia College does not have a track. I mean, they have running lanes around their soccer field, but that is a soccer facility at Columbia College. And I think they would very much probably get behind this and say, NAIA events, we'd love to have them. They've had the NAIA championship cross country already out at Gans Creek. So I can see them really enjoying this. But good track and field facilities do not come cheap.
No, they do not.
Nothing does anymore.
There was one other thing on that list, and I can't find it right now, that had to do with a roundabout that I cannot find where that was going to be, but it was a surprising roundabout location.
Was that the Blue Ridge and Providence, or Blue Ridge and Garth, maybe?
Yes.
It was Blue Ridge and something.
You're
not
right.
Blue Ridge and Garth. I don't think Garth crosses Blue Ridge.
Was it Blue Ridge and Providence?
That's what I'm thinking. It might have been Blue Ridge and Providence. I think Garth actually already has a Blue Ridge and Garth. I think already has a roundabout, if I'm remembering my
Anyway, I thought that was a surprise. I said, I like that.
Yeah.
That's a fun one.
The one speaking of roundabouts, the one I'm excited to see finish, even though I don't live anywhere near it, is that Fairview and Chapel Hill.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. That's
gonna be
year,
messy. Yeah, I think so. That's gonna be messy though.
That's funny. Nick Foster, the recently resigned member of the city council, I had a conversation with him. He said that's one of the reasons he will want to come back to Columbia to see how that looks once it's done. Here we go. Replace a 4-way stop with a roundabout, Discovery Parkway and New Haven intersection.
That's the other side of the town.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's a good one.
I
don't know if that's the only one, but that's one that
we're
Discovery
having
Parkway and what?
New Haven.
So that's out in 6.
Yeah.
And we're having that's where all of our development proposals are coming in, is that side of town. And so the traffic like there off Richland and Grace is really picking up. And as we add the hundreds and hundreds of homes that are being brought to us, I think that's going to be, it's actually one time where we're putting the infrastructure before the housing. So
highly unusual.
Right. So I'm going to celebrate that.
That's a 4-way stop out there now.
Yes.
And that could really help that area, because it always has a lot of traffic out there. Yeah, that was the roundabout that caught my attention.
Well, we'll move on from that. Good luck to Shane Creech and his team. So the one contentious item, which was somewhat surprising in terms of being contentious, I think, was a change to the city's stormwater waste disposal prohibitions, and also the consequences in terms of fees and what's the language I'm looking for? Just the punishment for violating.
Enforcement.
Enforcement, thank you. Now, this change came at the behest of the Missouri Department of Natural Resources due to past violations and fines that the city has faced over the last couple of years. And it passed in a 4-2 vote with council members Christina Hartman out of Ward 5 and Valerie Carroll out of Ward 1 opposing it. My interpretation of their opposition was centered around their concern that it was focused or rather targeting and seeking to penalize the homeless, who by DNR and others are seen to be the perhaps contributors to those pollutants getting into the stormwater system. For listeners, to be clear, the City of Columbia has to have a permit that the Department of Natural Resources provides to operate that stormwater system.
Correct.
Right now, the permit the city has is expired and will not be renewed until things like this occur, which is why staff brought it forward, again, at the behest of DNR, essentially saying, if you want your permit renewed, which is not really an if, you'd have to get it renewed, then you have to do this.
Correct.
As in addition to some other changes as well that were more staff side. But it was contentious and, again, was a 4-2 vote. So, Councilwoman Sample, you were on the yay side in terms of supporting this. What was your interpretation of this? How did you feel? Were you surprised by that split vote?
Not particularly. And I think this goes back to the multiple layers that everything involves. And one of the things that staff said that I think it's really important for people to hear is that, again, a lot of negotiating happens not on the dais. That's where the majority of the work happens, and not necessarily directly involving council members. What we see is the final product. And so there was a lot of legal back and forth between the state and the city. And my understanding, the way staff presented it, was that the language initially presented by the state was not acceptable to the city. And it went back to the state with, this is what we're comfortable with. And then they came back and it kind of went back and forth. So the language that we were presented with was the final language. So there was an effort made to be sensitive to language choice and, things like that I think were what was hanging people up on Monday. My view on it simply was, we need a water permit. And there are times and seasons to have a harder pushback with the state. And I don't think water quality is that space. That's just my personal view on it. And so that's period. That's my personal thought on it. We need the water permit. It was a big deal. I think it expired shortly after I was on council last year. And that was very alarming to me. And so I was anxious for this to move forward, for us to be permitted again.
My biggest frustration level watching the meeting Monday night was on this, because I think there are too many times when the council gets sidetracked and they start to make position statements that are not related to what the question is. I've got the ordinance right in front of me right now, and it's not very long, and they're not adding much to it. And in fact, I'll say two things. One is, I think by adding what is underlined and added to this doesn't really change what the city was doing, because it originally read, if I'm reading this right, it shall be unlawful for any person to place, deposit, or dump, or to cause or allow the placing, depositing, or dumping any refuse, rubbish, yard waste, paper litter, or other discarded or abandoned objects, articles, and accumulations containing pollutants into the municipal separate storm sewer system or into any waterway. Well, that's the original. What was added was human waste or litter from encampment activities or other gatherings in close proximity to any waterway. It makes sense to me. I mean, are you going to vote that you want that stuff in the sewer system and in the waterways? No. I mean, how can you vote against this? I don't understand. I get the statements about homeless, but I also think that this becomes a bigger issue then. And I'm not speaking for myself, but I read the comments that were associated with this on the city agenda.
They were vile.
And you see this regularly from a certain number of people in this community. I understand it breaks my heart to see the homeless people. And I walk through this downtown area every weekday with my wife on her way to work. And so we see a lot of people sleeping in doorways or slumped over or asking for money. I'm heartbroken that I can't solve those issues. But there are certain people in this town who are getting homeless conversation fatigue. And that conversation about this is not helpful, in my opinion. Because there are people who would say, well, goodness gracious, we got the Opportunity Campus. What more do you all want? We are doing what we can and going above what many communities do on the homeless issue. So saying that this is criminalizing homelessness or taking a target at the homeless people, I don't think it was an appropriate time to have that conversation when you're talking about the DNR asking the city to make adjustments. Because who wants human waste or litter from encampment activities into our waterways?
I do not, which is why I supported it.
Well, and I think another aspect of this, to your point, David, of like somewhat, no votes in this case being almost performative seems too critical, but just something akin to that is right now council, there's only 6 members of council, right? Nick Foster resigned. His seat hasn't been filled yet. So council is 6 members. A 3-3 vote, a tied vote is a failed vote. this was 4-2. If one more person had voted no for whatever reason, this would have failed. And then my question is, then what, right?
That
And so I'm like,
escalates it,
you're playing with fire when you start voting no and assuming that that your colleagues will bail you out by voting yes.
Mhm.
Is one way I interpret that as somebody who used to serve on council and did one year and witnessed that happen in that time, because it's not that uncommon for things like that to happen. People take symbolic votes, and that is fine in certain situations and appropriate in certain situations even. But with something like this, where you're risking a state permit or a state license and real fines and consequences, it's just, it seems to me somewhat reckless.
I think there are more effective and impactful ways to make those points. And again, when we're talking about our water, I understand why people think that it should be in every space and time. I do understand that. I disagree. And I think when we're talking about a basic need like water, there are other more impactful ways to impact policy regarding marginalized communities. I just don't think this is the place.
And I think your statement just a while ago, talking about how much work had gone into this prior to it coming to the city council, has to be a respect for the staff who put in a lot of time. And then for them to have to sit there and answer questions that really weren't relevant, in my opinion, again, to the issue at hand. That was tough. And who said, was it you or somebody else during the council meeting Monday night, talking about how this change in wording really wasn't going to change how the city goes about dealing with the issue of polluted waterways?
I think that was Vera, actually, Ward 2.
I think it might have been.
Because she was asking about the language. She goes, how is it actually changing?
Anything.
And the response from city staff was it was the wording that DNR required us to put in the ordinance.
And as you just said, it had been compromised and negotiated down from something else, probably.
Yeah, I think staff had specifically said that where DNR, Department of Natural Resources, started out was much more aggressive in their language. And that, to your point, David, and I think we've all said now, that staff worked hard and it seemed like negotiated hard to get it to where the language is acceptable.
Right.
So
yeah, I think staff understands where council sits on many things. And so they knew that if they brought us word for word, if they thought it was aggressive, they knew that there was no way it was going to pass. And they know that we need the permit. And so they brought us language that they know that we could prove.
Right. Yeah. Well, we'll move on from that. Not much more to be said on it, but certainly an interesting subject. This actually wasn't a discussion item on the agenda, but it was on introduction and first read, and it's not one subject, there's several. Is really the council will soon consider a series of proposed rate increases and fee increases across multiple city services. Everything from the benign, like hauled liquid waste fees, to sanitary sewer utility rates, solid waste rates, which is your trash,
roll cart rates,
right? Electric utility rates, water utility rates, and then fees related to development and the building of homes or commercial spaces. Same thing. I think we're getting a little ahead of ourselves because, again, council hasn't had the public hearings yet on these. But one cannot help but notice in the scheme of things that all that is happening, and at the same time, the council and the city of Columbia is waiting for the people of Columbia to respond to a 1% sales tax of public safety. And so everybody knows cost of everything is going up. Nothing's going down. Man, that's a rough environment.
Yes, it's not great timing. I mean, it's never, I say that kind of tongue in cheek, but it's never great timing to talk about raising taxes or raising rates. Nobody wants to do that. Nobody runs on that campaign platform or has that vision of what their time in office is going to be and look back and say, I was proud because I raised taxes and I increased rates. Nobody's going to necessarily be proud of that. They may be proud on then how that money is used to support our community, but actually getting to that place that's not a great feeling, and it's horrible timing.
Well, and just the two big ones to me, though, it's certainly the ones that people will feel the most, relatively speaking, is the electric rates. I think the proposal there is for a 6% increase, and then the water rate being a 10% increase. Not to mention the solid waste increase for rural carts. Or the other ones, as we mentioned. And this is also not just in the context of the public safety tax, but also in the context of recent history of every year for the past 3 years, I believe, the city of Columbia has increased its electric rate. And I think it's water rate, but I'm not as confident on that aspect of my memory. I know electric rates has gone up every year for, I believe, the last 3 years to accommodate really the infrastructure, right? And switching to advanced metering and finally beginning that process, which will help with a number of things that's more nuanced. But frankly, it comes down to, man, everything's costing more.
Yeah.
And the city has soaked up a lot of those costs over the years and not increased rates, but that has resulted in balance sheets for these individual utilities to be trending negative, if not already negative.
Correct.
And so on one hand, the city of Columbia is in a position where one might say they don't have a choice but to try and increase rates because they got to pay for things. But at the same time, again, I don't know how to, but just to reiterate, like, man, that's a rough environment. I don't envy council on their position right now.
Yeah, we're not real popular right now. Well, we're popular for the wrong reasons, maybe. But yeah, no, and it goes back to those cost of study services, and if people really take a look at them and or listen to the presentations on them, we have not kept up with what it costs to provide the utilities. We just haven't. And the city has absorbed a lot of those fees so that we don't have to pass it on to our customers. But we've just reached a point where we can't do that anymore. And so that's where the cost of service study came in. And that's where we have to say we at least have to break even, because we have to be able to continue to provide those utilities. So that's kind of where we're at.
It's interesting because, Nick, the conversations we had in regard to Proposition 1, the sales tax for public safety, we heard that from police chiefs and fire chief and others who said we needed to make a decision to provide more for public safety budget 30 years ago. I think that's one number that sticks out. But I mean, and that's the same message that you're talking about right now as far as utilities are concerned.
I think it's also reflective of another conversation that's been had several times on this show, and certainly out in the community, of kind of that, are we a town or are we a city?
Yeah.
Type of thing. And to me, this is symbolic of that. It was like, well, what the city's proposing is it's time to start paying city rates and not town rates because we've grown so much. And I don't remember those exact numbers, unfortunately, but I remember talking to Aaron Keyes on the utilities team about how, the cost of transformers, pre-COVID or since COVID, it has gone 5 times the price of what it used to be. And it takes 3 times as long to get one.
Yep. So it's, again, you have to put the money up front and then wait for a year and a half to 2 years before you actually get to implement it. It's the elected
officials are in a position where they have to make tough decisions. So my question to both of you and again, both of you have run and both of you have been on the city council. So let's say that you decide to raise these rates as staff is suggesting that they are raised. It angers people and people say, we're clearing out everybody who voted for this, we're getting rid of them. Replace them with other people. In your experience of what you learn once you become a council member that you don't know when you're just running for council, that new council that would run on criticizing those who raise rates, what would they learn? What would they discover once they sat in that seat?
That it was necessary.
I think not only that, but I also view it very, very seriously, and I know Jacque does, and many council members do as well, which is council is sworn with certain duties that they are sworn to abide by. And one of those, a key one, is a financial duty to protect and invest in the city of Columbia. It would be a dereliction of duty to not balance the checkbook. The city cannot operate in a deficit. Now, if, let's say in your scenario, David, this council approves all these increases and the public safety tax passes, so everything, right, happens, but then next April, people start getting unelected.
Right.
If the next council comes in, they have a choice, but the choice isn't to cut rates. The choice would be, what services are you cutting?
Exactly.
Right. That's the option. So it's never to go negative in terms of spending. It is to cut things. And folks like to say that, and we've talked about this a lot with the public safety tax proposal. And I think people still don't have an answer to, well, what would you cut?
No,
because
they don't.
They underestimate, they overestimate what some departments are spending.
Correct.
And they underestimate how much money you would need to cut.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
But they don't take that financial duty seriously. And again, it is a dereliction of duty not to fulfill your oath of office. Mm-hmm. And some folks, you can choose not to take that seriously, but you're supposed to.
Yeah, and I'm going to say 2 things here, too. I mean, when you're running a campaign, you can run on anything. I mean, I remember somebody telling me that. They're like, it doesn't really matter what you run on because you're going to get in the office and you're going to change your mind anyway. And I thought that was just horrible. As a new candidate, I'm like, well, that just makes you so dishonest. And that's why people don't like politicians. But there's a ring of truth to that, that you think you understand things from the outside. And then when you get inside, like I said, and you do all of those layers, you're just like, oh, I understand where this decision was made. And I still may not necessarily agree with it, but I understand it. And then the second point being, and not just for people who are running for office, but for the public at large, social media. And I could just say those 2 words, but people pick and choose what they want to talk about and how they want to talk about it. And a lot of them are very intelligent people, but don't either look into the full information or don't share all of the information, or maybe share it in a way that's biased. And then other people who trust those people, it just snowballs. And then you just see all of this back and forth. And it's really hard to, if not impossible, to redirect any of that, even with factual information, because people get caught in their emotions. This is my human behavior hat coming on. They are using their emotional brain and they're having an emotional reaction. And even when you present the actual facts, they can't hear it because they're in that angry phase, which again, I understand completely, but they're not necessarily thinking rationally. They're thinking emotionally.
Are cities starting to combat that by having their own responses to social media? And I don't know whether that should happen. I don't know. I'm just wondering, in a communications department, can you have someone who engage the social media people and say, you're not looking at this in a productive way, or you're not looking at the whole picture, or some of this information is incorrect?
I think we'll see what happens with our new communications director. I know that's been part of our conversation. And I think you'll see, like with all of the council members, we all have different levels of involvement on social media and we all interact differently on social media. And I don't know that there's been a really good model that anybody's had, because you don't,
That's a question.
you don't want to.
And is it
block
productive
somebody
or not?
It depends.
I don't know whether it's
on the
productive or
person.
not.
Like I've had both. I've had really horrible social media interactions, and I kind of dig through posts. And if there's a legitimate question, I try to answer the question regardless of whatever name they've called me, because I believe in creating a free and open space to a point. But then there's other people who, again, like I said, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. And with the public safety tax roadshow, is what we've been jokingly call it this summer, I've kind of taken on the understanding that if we would have known who was attending the different, I'll say the ward specific meetings, had emailed them the questions a week ahead, they had emailed me how they would answer it, we'd get to the forum and they would ask the question and I would read their own words back, I would be wrong. That's how it's been going. So, and I think social media is the same way. It's they're in their emotional headspace because everything is hard right now. There's a lot of really hard things happening right now, and people need a scapegoat. They need somebody to blame. And unfortunately, sometimes that's the role of an elected person, is you have to take the blame and say, okay, I hear you. And that's just kind of, I think, where we are right now.
Sometimes I think that if there was more publicity about what is being said on social media, but see, I think the social media probably is spread farther than I imagine it is, because I'm thinking if I knew some of these things, I would be totally even more disgusted, and probably I just thought if the light was shining on certain things that are being done through social media in a different way or in a broader way, I guess I'm naive enough to think, well, maybe that would kind of temper or tame some of social media. Mm-hmm. But I don't know. I don't think it would.
I think there's a trust issue right now, and there has been, I think, for a while, but it's going on. And like I said, people are angry.
If name calling was out in the broad daylight, would that matter? Because I'm thinking about a former, I think, state rep who said some things in social media that made it into the media. And I told you what, I was flabbergasted and totally grossed out and disgusted to think that somebody in an elected position would say those things. Mm-hmm. I would feel the same way if a member of the community was identified as, this is what they said about you.
Well, go on my council page and you'll see it.
I think, two thoughts. One, in terms of like the city of Columbia doing anything, I think that would be a tremendous waste of resources and time. It's a black hole.
Yeah, it is.
Right? Because
it would never end.
To your point, David, right? It's like, it's so much broader. And it's like, what's the return on that investment, which is what the city has to be thinking of in terms of dollars and staff time. I wouldn't want them to be doing that, at least. And then the second part, and this is my own personal opinion, and maybe I'm being pessimistic, I think most folks on social media are not looking for an answer or for a constructive dialogue.
That's probably true.
I don't care what your medium is. I don't care if it's Facebook or Instagram or Reddit or whatever it is. I don't think that's the case. I've never seen that be the case. Again, maybe my world perspective, it's not certainly the same as everyone's, but I feel confident in that regard that that's not the medium, which is unfortunate because that's the medium where everybody is.
Yeah.
And that's where people feel the need and the desire to be emotional about and very outspoken about, politics or city government or anything like that. But that's also at the same time the place where it's least productive, which is ironic and unfortunate.
Mm-hmm.
Well, then I'm just pessimistic that we are headed for a horrible outcome of everything in society. Because if you can't point out that's wrong and that's cruel and that's rude and that's mean and that's exaggerated and that is totally false, then what's our hope?
Yeah. And I've encouraged people to do that exact same thing and just say, because we know a lot of the people who I know have been not nice on my page. I know, a lot of them I don't know personally, but some of them I do. And I know they wouldn't say that if we were looking at each other. But then I've had other people who I don't know who've been very inappropriate. And I've had to call inappropriate on many levels. And I've actually reached out to my friends and can you please get onto my page and just say, you shouldn't be saying that. Or just even say, that's kind of weird for you to say. It doesn't mean that's all, period. Because I publicly can't necessarily say because there's words I want to say, believe me. And I can't necessarily push back in that way. And so I do think that is, if we are going to have any kind of productivity on social media, we need the silent majority that is existing to just come in and say, that's irrelevant. That has nothing to do with us.
Mm-hmm.
That's weird.
That's just disgusting.
Or that's disgusting.
What's with the personal attacks?
Right. When did it become about, whatever, so it's...
Well,
to your point, the elected official, especially, you're just feeding the fire. If you comment, and it never ends. Again, because you're not changing their mind.
Mm-mm.
They're not looking for a conversation.
Some of them are. I will say that I've had some that we've been able to turn it around.
Yeah, I'm certainly generalizing, but as we all know, and I know councilors know, you can also count on the same 10 people being active in on Facebook or wherever. But I also want to respond to David to your point of the broader pessimism, not to pat ourselves on the back, but that's why David and I are doing things like this show, is to help with that dialogue and to help inform folks and to give a space for people to talk, because we've been heavy on council members and staff, but that's not our goal. Isn't to only do that. Right. So there's certainly going to be times and opportunities in the near future as well where we're going to bring on, activists, so to speak, or other folks in the community, because we want to have a dialogue. And I firmly believe there's a great need, to your point, the silent majority of Columbia who's looking for that. And I think, we're trying to contribute to it. We're doing our small part for our, there's dozens of us.
So we'll move on, but let me ask you, this is getting back to what the council will be doing. So when are these discussions, like Nick pointed out, all of these rate increases were listed under first read and introduction. How are you going to do that while also over the next month to two discuss the budget for the coming year? Are you going to incorporate both of those? Is that why you're starting at 6?
Yes.
You sure you don't need to start at 3?
We talked about it. We still have to have a pre-council too. So we've shrunk our pre-council to only 1 hour instead of 2, and then bumped up the regular meeting to 6. But that's why we did that, is because these agendas are going to be massive.
You might just end on the same day.
Right.
So the rate increases will have to be figured into the next year budget?
Mm-hmm.
So, okay.
That's the order of events, to David's point, is these are happening now because they need to pass or fail from a council vote so that staff can incorporate that result into the FY27 budget that is actively being deliberated by council.
These aren't far down the road increases or discussions. These are near future, immediate.
3 weeks.
Yeah, absolutely. Jackie, I've got 2 questions for you to round out the show. Got a hard one and an easy one. Which one do you want to go with?
Let's do hard.
Hard first. Public safety tax.
Oh, I knew you were going to say that.
This is the last show we'll record that will come out before the vote. Any last comments? Any last things? Words of wisdom? Feelings? I know as you said, you've been one of the leaders on council in terms of out in the community, speaking on behalf of the city of Columbia and this proposition. And so I want to give you opportunity to say your piece. I'm sure you're tired of saying it, but if there's anything you'd like to share with our listeners, please go ahead and do so.
Sure. So it's probably nothing new that, people have probably heard before, but I will say one of the wonderful things that has come out of our little roadshow is the relationships built. I've gotten to know, Chief Schluty and Chief Schaefer so much better, and they really are fantastic at their jobs. And Columbia is so lucky to have such strong leadership in those 2 very important positions. And so number 1, that's a huge takeaway for our city. And I can tell you from each little community meeting we've had, everybody loves them. They love them, they appreciate them being there and their efforts, and they understand what they're asking for. Where I'm hearing we don't want to vote for this is because they have questions about how the city has spent money previously. And then in the same sentence, they say, well, I support police and fire, but I'm not going to support the tax. And to me, those 2 don't belong in the same sentence. If you support police and fire, you need to support the tax, because that's what this is. And people have lots of concerns that it's not going to be dedicated and we're going to trick that's not we can't. That's not how the language is written. So I guess, that's just my final takeaway, that if you really do support police and fire, you need to support this tax.
I think that's well said.
Yeah. I've got nothing to add. We've had, we did
I listened to it.
I would say we did like a 2.5 hour show.
You suffered through that whole thing?
I did. I've listened to it. It was good.
Oh, thank you for listening.
Yeah.
Like I said, dozens of us. So second question for you. With the resignation of Nick Foster, Mayor Buffalo asked and you accepted the responsibility of being mayor pro tem. One, how's that going? And two, what does that mean to you?
It's going good. I've already done a lot of fun little things and met lots of people that I, never would have crossed paths with otherwise. So that's been fun. And what it means to me is just, it's another way for me to serve my community. It's another way, I guess, period, really. It's just another opportunity for me to give back to my home, which I, now consider Columbia my home. Because I've been here long enough, but it's just another way for me to do that. And so I feel honored to be trusted in that position. I feel honored to be asked to do that and to serve Columbia in that way.
Could you share for our listeners real quick, what is being mayor pro tem?
Sure.
What does that actually mean?
So it's serving as the mayor when the mayor is not available. So, for instance, the simplest example is when she needs a bathroom break during city council, I take over running the meeting, But then there's other, like some of these community events, if she's unable to attend, then I will attend in her place to do proclamations or welcoming statements, those kinds of things. So that's pretty much it.
Well, thank you for taking on that added responsibility. I know it came with a tremendous pay raise.
Yeah, huge.
$0 on top of the $0 you already make.
Right.
So
rolling in it.
Do you ever have time to pay attention to what other cities and their city councils are facing?
I don't have a whole lot of time, but I'm going to the NLC, the National League of Cities conference this fall, and I'm really looking forward to building relationships with other cities. What I've been told from other people, in the network is that we're all talking about housing. We're all talking about homelessness. We're all talking about rate increases. And public safety. We're all talking about concerns for public safety, the decreased number of people going into public safety, the increased cost to provide public safety. So there seems to be a very common thread through many cities throughout our country. We're not special in that way.
Yeah, that I always tell folks the only difference between the city of Columbia and Centralia or Rocheport is just scale. Mm-hmm. Everyone's dealing with the exact same issues, just on different scales.
Yep.
And that's the only difference. Well, Councilwoman and Mayor Pro Tem Jacque Sample, thank you for joining us today. Thank you for serving our city. Best of luck managing everything. Best of luck with making these tough decisions that you all will have to do with the city budget, not just with the potential fee increases, but every city budget is always challenging.
Yes.
And certainly nowadays. So good luck with those things. Thanks for joining the show. David, any last comments?
No, I'm just, I come to these sometimes having no idea of anything that I feel like I want to say, but I'm always grateful for an opportunity to be able to participate and to learn from them. Thank you.
Absolutely. Listeners, this has been the Como Vanguard podcast. You can find everything Como Vanguard, including the written publication, and submit questions or comments for the show at comovanguard.com. We will see you next time.